Welcome to the Cannabis Review, everybody. I've got a great episode for you today. I'm delighted to be joined on the show by Gino Kenny. Gino's a TD for Dublin Mid West. How are you keeping, Gino?
I own great.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, mate. I know you've been a long advocate working in this industry, and you've been a campaigner for medical cannabis program in Ireland. You also introduced the legislation to legalise medical cannabis and led the successful national campaign resulting in the change of law. Can we start basically there? What's the overview at the moment of Ireland's cannabis program as you see it?
Well, yeah, you're right. On 5 years ago, almost to the day, I introduced the bill around medical cannabis, and obviously it, eventually pushed the government into changing the policy after a very, very long campaign. And also campaigners, families, and individuals had campaigned for access, for themselves or their family members. So that was the kind of the cutting edge of the campaign. So at the moment, the Medical Cannabis Access Program will commence in the next, I think, week. And for the first time, if you have a qualified condition under the program, you can get a medical cannabis product prescribed for that condition. Now it's quite restrictive. We were very critical at the time in relation to the omission of chronic pain. But it is what it is, and hopefully we can campaign in the very, very near future in relation to widen the scope of the Medical Cannabis Access Program in relation to other conditions, and people getting access via the long-term illness scheme or the medical card. So that's where we're at. It's a long campaign that is in some ways only begun, but we'll keep pushing forward in relation to kind of reforming and people getting access to medical cannabis via the program and broadening it out in the very near future.
Okay, and can you tell me who's responsible for the choice of ailments that are be able to receive this program?
So the HPRA, which is the Health Product Regulation Authority, they commissioned a document in 2017 in relation to medical cannabis in Ireland, and they recommended a medical cannabis access program with them three conditions. We were very critical at the time. They have an expert group that kind of made that kind of recommendation, and at the time I said, why was chronic pain and other conditions omitted? They gave an explanation which I thought was kind of slightly kind of didn't really hold weight, but they're the kind of, I suppose they're the group and kind of authority that have put the program together. But at least it's on the positive side. At least it's a start, from where we were. And it's been, as I said, it's been very protracted. But at least now families and individuals can get medical cannabis products under prescription rather than have to go through a license system, which the license system will still be in existence. But families hopefully can get it under prescription very, very soon, and don't have to go through all the kind of bureaucracy and the kind of the arbitrary nature of the licensing system.
Okay, and it brings on to the next topic is your bill that you're proposing. You're going to be debating in the Dáil this summer. Do you want to give everybody an overview of exactly what it is that you're going to be debating in the Dáil?
Yeah. So the bill I'm proposing to put forward, the Cannabis Regulation and Control Bill. Obviously, this is for recreation use, and the two issues shouldn't be conflated in relation to medical and recreation use. Sometimes they do, but sometimes we can't help that. But so the bill, it's been drafted at the moment. I'm hoping to introduce it sometime in the autumn, probably October, because the Dáil comes back on the 14th of September. And we'd hope to have the bill ready to go in around that time. So again, it hasn't been drafted, but it essentially will, suppose it cause a debate in relation to end of prohibition and kind of making cannabis legal in a framework of regulation and a framework of revenue, and a framework of where people are, not criminalised for cannabis use, cultivation, and possession, because it doesn't work, and it's been a failure essentially. So we need to go beyond failure, and go beyond. When you go beyond failure, you have to look at something very, very different, and a paradigm shift, and that shift is legalization. So the bill hopefully will kind of instigate that debate, and kind of create a kind of, I suppose, an atmosphere where we have to look beyond the kind of very antiquated laws around cannabis use. So that's what it will do. The finer details, I can't really comment at the moment, because obviously,
we can get you back and we can discuss those kind of things
I think
in
it's
detail.
better,
I think. Can you give me an example? Let's say for everybody watching here, let's talk us through the procedure if it does happen. So you bring a bill to the Dáil, you'll debate it. Let's say you convince your opposition that they're going to be in favour of what you're proposing. Everybody says yay, the bill gets proposed. Talk us through like the next 3 important steps that happen that bill then to be able to, let's say it progresses to where there is a dispensary that somebody can go in with a medical card who's over the age of 21 and can access that as an adult consumer without being it under a medical program. How many? What is the duration of time, and how many?
Well, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to put a time frame on it. I mean, things in here work extremely slow, and especially if you're in opposition. The vast majority of opposition bills never see the light of day. They never get past. You'll introduce a bill, it's debated, and then it's voted down. That's what happens to the vast majority of bills. And even bills that kind of go beyond that, which would be second stage, then they go into committee stage or pre-legislative scrutiny. There's every chance that it will never see the light of day. So
do you see what if the opposition came in, and can they take your idea and your bill and bring it forward themselves?
Yeah, no, they can, and if they want to do that, I'm fine.
You'd be supporting them.
I'm fine if the government say, okay, we looked at your bill, and we let it pass the committee stage. In some ways, it has happened to other opposition bills where, like, an opposition idea or a bill has been basically the guts of it has been taken by the government in situ, and they've legislated for it. If they want to do that, fair enough. That's no problem. I'm not sure if that will happen. But the main thing is that we introduce a bill. There's a debate in the Dáil. There's a vote very soon after, and then the Dáil then gives direction on where the bill needs to go. Does it fall completely? Is there an amendment to the bill? The best case scenario that it's voted on, and it's agreed that it goes to probably pre-legislative scrutiny or committee stage. That would be a big kind of step in relation to ending prohibition in Ireland if it could get to that stage, pre-legislative scrutiny. So there's a long, long way to go in relation to this. It's obviously a numbers game as well. Like, the government have a majority, and if they want to vote any opposition bill down, they can. But we would be looking for support in the government, particularly the Green Party. The Green Party have a very good policy around cannabis use, so we'd be hoping for their support. Now, whether they're in a kind of a pact with the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, kind of the coalition. So we'd be looking for a broad spectrum of support to look at the kind of merits of legalization and ending prohibition.
Okay, brilliant. And the last topic that we want to talk about is the inflection point for politicians. It leads us on from what we were just talking about. Is it going to be the case of, like, say, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael? We know that the Green parties, you guys are in favour of this. The other parties that have claimed to not be in favour, is it going to be job creation? Is it going to be revenue earned for the tax and licensing excise people? Is it patient access? What are the inflection points do you see politicians actually, going, what, I'm going to support this now?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And we've seen over the last couple of decades how social issues, I suppose people power and kind of persuasion has changed politicians' minds. So there's a kind of there's a revolution going on in Ireland in relation to social issues. And again, you can just look back at the last 6 or 7 years of certain issues that were kind of, in some ways, slightly taboo, but they're kind of mainstream in some guises. And drug reform is probably no different. There's a lot of taboos around it. What will kind of change people's minds? I think there's a number of factors. I think, public opinion is ahead of politicians in this, right? I think by a good margin. And when you put all the moving parts of legalization on the table, I think the majority of people in Ireland, actually the majority of people in most countries, will say, look, keeping cannabis illegal hasn't worked, right? It doesn't work, and it's counterproductive. So we want to do something very different, and that different is the opposite of what is happening now. And what's happening now is people are being criminalized. People going through the criminal justice system and being criminalized for cannabis use. That doesn't work. So we want to do something different. And if there's enough kind of a public mood out there, to push, they want change on this, then things can happen very, very quickly, and things can happen, unexpectedly. And other parties that had a kind of an opposition to certain things, minds do change, they do evolve. But the cutting edge of kind of that change is always a public opinion. It's people on the street, people kind of contacting their TDs and so forth, and saying, look, on this issue, we believe that it's wrong to criminalize people, and we need to do something very, very different and with a better outcome, with kind of harm reduction. So they're all the factors, and there's other factors as well about, as I said, health-led approach, how it actually could create revenue, how it could, where there's regulation, because there's no regulation whatsoever around cannabis use. So once you have prohibition, then a vacuum exists, and where there's a vacuum, certain individuals and groupings will fill that vacuum in. And at the moment, that vacuum is being filled in by the black market and criminal gangs, and they use all sorts of unscrupulous tactics to, to kind of for distribution and bringing minors into the distribution of drugs, and it's pretty insidious. So why allow that to happen? Governments are allowing this to happen, and they're waiving control over the distribution of cannabis. So, what our bill would do is basically cut the black market out, not entirely, because I think sometimes there will be, there will always be kind of the black market in the background, but less so in relation to end of prohibition. So all them factors on, trying to kind of debate TDs that may be in opposition to it, and kind of teasing kind of things out they may have concerns about. So all that factors, I think, will be a kind of very robust debate and an interesting debate in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that debate needs to maintain the fact that any revenue comes from the cannabis industry needs to go back into the stakeholders in each neighborhood where that industry is making money. So police reinvestment, schools reinvestment, health reinvestment. So it's not just an industry that's there to make money. It's an industry that's there to generate revenue for the community that those businesses are in, and help benefit anybody. And I think you'd want to be a cold-hearted SOB to even not be in favour of that, regardless of what your stance on other drugs may be.
Exactly, Owen. And I think things are changing. Like, you see the United States, you see Mexico, you see other countries around the world. They're looking at things differently than they've done what they were doing before. Yeah. And kind of, the misuse of drugs, the act itself is quite antiquated, and it needs to be reformed, particularly around cannabis use. And I think there's obviously there's a kind of a middle road called decriminalisation, and I'm all for decriminalisation. But it doesn't, decriminalisation, particularly around cannabis, doesn't go far enough. You have to be talking about legalisation and regulation.
Adult use market.
Yeah. Because if you're talking about decriminalisation, it kind of fudges the idea. And some people, like, I think the majority of TDs would be for decriminalisation in some form. But they need to go before. Now, they've been talking about this for decades, right? Like this place, they can. It's a talking shop. I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of talk and not enough action, and particularly around issues where working class people are really, really affected, and it's a class issue as well. So we need to kind of, keep kind of raising the issue around kind of why kind of prohibition and kind of criminalizing people for personal drug use it's counterproductive. And I think other countries are seeing that, and they're going to have to do something different because, it's about kind of, it's about kind of, it's a societal thing as well. And it's an issue where, people can be drawn into that kind of the alternative economy in relation to the distribution of drugs. And that can, as I said, that can be very insidious in relation to communities and individuals and so forth. So we need to do something very different from what has happened and what will be the future. And that future is ending prohibition and kind of doing something very, very different from what we were doing before.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And as the generations move along, as I said, I think those outdated policies that became in the Reagan eras are long since gone. Anybody born after 1980 now has a bit of cop on about them and understands the world that they live in and grew up with this as a thing and realise the garbage that's out there in the illegal market and the fact that it's now considered like wine over in California with billion-dollar companies. So those companies aren't going to just sit over there. Once they're allowed to go to North or Europe, they're going to be over here in Ireland, should be taking advantage of the jobs and that are going to come here with it. But Gino, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, mate. I hope we get to touch base towards the end of the year and find out more details in the bill and give everybody a little bit more information. But you enjoy the rest of your day and keep up the great work.
Thanks, pal.
See you later, guys.
Thanks, man.